In November 2005, 6-year-old Aarone Thompson was reported missing. She was last seen wearing a white sweatshirt and pink sweatpants. Further investigation revealed she died sometime between 2002 and 2005. She lived with her father, Aarone Thompson, and his girlfriend, Shelley Mary Lowe, who at the time was pregnant. In the house, you also had Shelley's 5 children. You had Thompson's 2 children and her half-brother. And for the purposes of this video, Aarone, who's the victim, and Aarone, who's the father, can be confusing, so I'll refer to the father as just Thompson, which is his last name. On November the 14th, 2005, Thompson notified authorities that Aarone had disappeared. He said she got into an argument with Shelley over some cookies and ran away from home at 1 p.m. She has never been heard from again. Remember, she's only 6 years old. Now, police investigators noted Thompson and Shelley did not appear distressed over Aarone's disappearance, although temperatures outside were below freezing and it was snowing, and neither of them had any suggestions as to where the child might be. Thompson said he was tired and he wanted to go to bed. He consented to a formal interview at police headquarters later on. He then fell asleep on the stairs at his house between 10 and 11 p.m. Imagine that, your daughter's missing. No, I don't want to talk about it. I need a kip, moron. Both Thompson and Shelley ceased cooperating with authorities the next day. As for Aarone's biological mother, her name was Lynette Thompson. She lived in Michigan when her daughter disappeared. She had not seen her daughter since October 2001 and was not considered a suspect in her disappearance. Within a day of Aarone's disappearance, Lynette gave media interviews, stating she disbelieved Thompson's story and believed Aarone met with foul play. Lynette stated that Aarone and her brother had been born in Michigan. Thompson and the children moved to Colorado in 2001. Lynette was supposed to go with them, but she had to be hospitalized, so she stayed behind. After she recovered, she planned to join them in their new home, but Thompson called her and said, "No, you're not coming." After that, he refused to tell her where they are and what kind of living conditions they were in. Investigators announced they did not believe she disappeared on November 14th. They believed that instead, she had been murdered inside her home and that had been dead for some time before her disappearance was reported, perhaps as long as a year and a half. The first time the children were interviewed, they supported their parents' story that Aarone ran away. They told investigators what Aarone's favorite food was, her favorite color, and that she had dressed up as a witch for Halloween. But after they were taken into foster care, they all recanted their statements. They said Shelley had told them to lie and that they had not seen Aarone in a while. And for the police, both Thompson and Shelley were named as persons of interest in Aarone's disappearance and presumed death, and their home was designated a crime scene. Police stated they refused to take lie detector tests, and the investigators had to interview over 450 people. They searched the Thompson home. They even dug up the yard. They found false identification cards, including driver licenses, and there was no evidence as to Aarone's whereabouts. Investigators stated that no credible person claimed to have seen Aarone for about a year and a half. Interestingly, however, Aarone was reported missing just hours after a social worker visited the home. The family had been receiving a housing subsidy from a charitable organization, and the social worker was supposed to determine if they were still eligible. She spent 45 to 60 minutes in the home and inspected every room, but did not see Aarone anywhere. Aarone's name was not listed on the paperwork for the home, but neither was the name of her older brother. The next day, Shelley called the social worker and tried to convince her she had seen Aarone, but the social worker refused to acknowledge this in her report statement. And that is interesting. They reported to the police her missing body after the social worker came, because now they knew the social workers would be onto them. Aarone herself had never attended any school in the area or had been registered as a homeschool student. Shelley reportedly told one individual that she had been unable to register Aarone at school because the child's birth certificate and immunization records had been lost. But it was later determined that Aarone's father and stepmother did in fact have a birth certificate for her, and she last received medical attention in May 2002 when she was treated for a bad tooth at the hospital. When her father reported her missing, he said she was 7 years old, but she would have actually been 6. The picture he provided was from the summer of 2002. He said the family had no more recent photographs before Aarone was reported missing. Thompson requested that a non-profit foundation help provide Christmas presents for his children, but on this list he did not put Aarone's name on there. There was also no toothbrush and no mattress in the house for Aarone. Thompson and Shelley said she slept with Shelley's daughter, Kayla, but Kayla denied it, and none of Aarone's DNA could be found on her bed. Further suspicions arose when, during the investigation, officers spoke with Eric Williams Sr. He was Shelley Lowe's ex-boyfriend and the father of 2 of her children. He told police that about a year before Thompson had reported Aarone missing, Shelley told him Aarone stopped breathing in the bathtub. Shelley then attempted mouth-to-mouth resuscitation but was unable to revive the child. She denied being responsible for Aarone's death and stated the girl had simply died suddenly and no one had done anything to cause her death. Shelley allegedly stated she and Thompson had concealed Aarone's death and buried her body in a field far away because the child had been assaulted and had a suspicious scar on her body as a result, and Shelley was afraid that the other children would be removed from the home. Williams said Shelley was crying and hysterical while she told him the story. She then told Mr. Williams that she and Thompson had decided to drive her body far away and bury it, and she did not remember where she put it. She said that when they were burying Aarone, she could hear the last little breaths of life come out of her body. She then explained that she and Thompson had a story to explain the disappearance, that Thompson had taken Aarone to see her mother in Michigan, and that someone had kidnapped Aarone during the trip. Shelley then asked Mr. Williams to commit identity theft to help her raise money for Thompson's legal fees. He, of course, declined. What kind of request is that? And it's important to note though, at this time, Williams himself was in state prison on drug charges, and Shelley once accused him of sexual assault. He was never charged with this, however, but the point is, he was motivated to tell police because of course he can have his time cut down. Now Shelley's friend, Tabitha Graves, also had a similar account. She said in the summer of 2004, Shelley was riding in the car with her when she suddenly said Aarone had died in her sleep months before. She said she and Thompson decided not to call 911 after they discovered the body, and Thompson took the body away in his car and came back a long time later without it. Graves stated that Shelley was extremely upset while she was talking about it and was shaking and crying so hard that she was having trouble breathing. Shelley told her she did not report Aarone's death because she was worried the other children would be taken away. She said she was trying to come up with a good explanation for Aarone's disappearance. After Shelley told her this story, Graves began tape recording all their telephone conversations, and she later gave these tapes to the police. In the conversations, Shelley referred to Aarone in the past tense and said she would have Thompson place flowers on the child's grave. She repeatedly urged Graves not to tell the police what happened and expressed fears of going to jail and losing her children. Tabitha Graves noted Shelley did not like Aarone and had trouble disciplining her. In fact, there were more statements between Shelley and Tabitha Graves that began a year after their 2004 conversation. Miss Graves, cooperating with the police, recorded more conversations she had with Shelley. During these conversations, she expressed regret for telling her about Aarone's death. The court ruled that the recorded statements were non-testimonial, and the court admitted them as co-conspirator statements because they were clearly statements in furtherance of and during the course of the conspiracy. You then had Velma Jean Belzer, Shelley's aunt. She remembered a phone call she got from Shelley in 2003. Shelley asked her what to do if a child stops breathing and said either she or Thompson were going to discipline the daughter and she had passed out. Velma said, well, just call 911. And then a couple of days later, when she asked Shelley about the child's condition, Shelley said, don't worry, I took care of it. Shelley and Velma telephoned one another almost daily, but Shelley did not mention Aarone to her aunt again until a year later, when she said Aarone was missing. So it was in May 2006 that a grand jury was convened to investigate Aarone's disappearance. However, that same month, Shelley died at the age of 33. The cause of death was heart disease, and she had a history of heart problems and also experienced complications from her final pregnancy. Throughout her part in the investigation, she maintained her innocence in Aarone's case until her death. But to give you an indication how she treated the children, there was an incident. One of the kids told police that he participated in burying the child's body. He told police, she's still alive, and they told me to take a butcher and finish her off. He also recalled being disciplined by Shelley. He said one time Shelley was mad at him for eating too much of her cereal, so she had Thompson assault him repeatedly. Shelley herself was never interviewed by police because she refused to speak to them. Thompson himself continued to maintain his innocence in Aarone's disappearance. Now, in early 2007, a civil dependency and neglect jury investigating the alleged of Aarone's siblings ruled that Thompson was responsible for the bodily injury or death of Aarone. In May 2007, Thompson was indicted on nearly 60 counts, the most serious of which was child assault resulting in death. That charge carried a maximum sentence of 48 years to life in prison. The other charges included multiple counts of conspiracy to commit child assault resulting in death. There were also counts of false reporting to authorities, concealing a death, conspiracy to conceal a death, abuse of a corpse, conspiracy to commit assault of a corpse, 7 counts of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, and multiple accounts of child incidents and assault. Some of these charges were related to the treatment of Thompson's other children and not Aarone. So according to the authorities, they believed Aarone died sometime between 02 and 04, but probably in 03. And it was in 03 that the Thompsons told Aarone's siblings she'd moved to Michigan to live with Lynette. Shortly afterwards, all of Aarone's belongings were placed in the basement. None of the children in the family saw or heard from her again. Her siblings told investigators that before she went missing, Aarone was repeatedly assaulted and kept in a closet for hours at a time, often as punishment for bedwetting. She was also denied proper nourishment and medical attention. All the children stated there had been incidents with belts, baseball bats, and other objects. The children claimed at least one of them were in these incidents every day. Several of them had scars from those moments. In fact, Shelley's son Andrew stated he heard Thompson disciplining Aarone in the basement one night. Aarone was screaming. Then suddenly, the screaming stopped and Andrew heard Thompson swearing. Andrew never saw Aarone ever again. A day or two later, he asked his mother, "Where is Aarone?" She told him she's gone to Michigan. Andrew noticed a bad smell in the basement a few days later, which lasted for several weeks. He said Shelley began attending church and saying nightly prayers a short time after Aarone disappeared, but this was uncharacteristic of her previous behavior. Now, all the children testified against Thompson at his 8-week trial in the fall of 2009, repeating their stories of what they endured. Thompson's defense acknowledged that Aarone was dead and Thompson had helped cover up her death, but they said Shelley was the one that did it and Thompson only helped. The trial also disclosed that the children were told to describe what clothes Aarone was wearing. They didn't remember much, but they do remember a pink garment of some sort. Police at the time said Shelley and Thompson had been uncooperative and refused to answer numerous requests by investigators to be interviewed. Forensic scientists said if Aarone was bleeding and died in the bathtub, as was reported to the police, it will be a challenge to recover DNA samples from the drain. A scientist said over time, with a lot of water, bacteria flows through a drain and a blood sample becomes diluted and contaminated. He said that would make recovering a usable DNA sample highly improbable. Tom Griffin, a lab agent with the Colorado Investigation Office, said drains are just a cesspool for bacteria that can go ahead and break down DNA. He said anything can dilute it, water over time, or clean up activity. And during the trial, Thompson refused to answer the main unresolved question that I know you're asking regarding his daughter. The judge said it's not too late to reveal where Aarone's body is, because I can tell you the body has actually never been found. Aurora Police Chief Dan Oates asked Thompson to provide closure in what had been a 4-year search. He said, "Help us find her body. Where is her body?" But Thompson refused. The judge, Valeria Spencer, gave Thompson several chances to speak on his own behalf and reveal where the body was buried before she sentenced him. Each time, Thompson shook his head and said no. Spencer then sentenced him to 114 years in prison for Aarone's death and for the assaults of the 7 other siblings living in the home. She said, "These children will recover from the physical injuries, but they will not recover from the injuries to the soul. You have failed as a father. You have failed as a man." Thompson was convicted of 31 counts, including the assault resulting in the death. At the time, Thompson was 42 years old. Aarone herself would have been 6 years old, but police believe she died 2 years earlier, and that Thompson and Shelley buried her in a field somewhere. The sentencing hearing was the most dramatic day in the week-long trial. Several children living in the home spoke to the judge, as did their foster parents and others involved. Some of the children said, "I hate you, Thompson. You're nothing but a coward." In fact, Thompson's sister even told everyone how he's a liar and repeatedly lied when questioned by police. She actually reviewed the taped interview, and at one point, police left the interview room and Thompson looked up by himself and said, "Aarone, where are you?" He was pretending. He was lying. He knew the camera was there, and his sister said it was an Oscar-worthy acting performance. Lynette Thompson traveled from Detroit for the hearing. She is the victim's biological mother. She said she was happy with the sentence, but it pains her knowing she cannot give her daughter Aarone a proper burial. "It hurt so bad," she said. Vicky Kearney, a therapist who worked with several of the children, read a letter to the judge written by one of Shelley's daughters. The letter said, "You go to jail, Big A. You go to jail. You'll never do this to me again." Later, the judge recalled the testimony of the children living in the home, calling it a torture chamber, where incidents were so frequent they became matter of fact to the kids. She recounted their testimony, in which said it all happened with almost anything Thompson and Shelley could get their hands on. The sister then shouted out, "You did this to the children?" Almost in disbelief, she said it again. After hearing all the details, she shouted out in court, "You did this to the children." However, the defense attorney, Jim O'Connor, urged the judge not to hand out a sentence that would incarcerate Thompson for much more than the rest of his life. He said, "This man is not a monster." Well, what else is he, you muppet? So, to conclude on the story, Thompson was convicted on the 31 out of the 55 charges against him, including the incident that led to the death of Aarone. He was acquitted of 22 charges, mainly related to the incidents of the other children. In November 2009, he was sentenced to over 100 years in prison, and the children were given to foster parents. In fact, Thompson, the cheeky sod, had the audacity to appeal his conviction, but in 2017, his appeal was rejected based on his argument that he'd been unconstitutionally prevented from using the lawyer of his choice. Shelley and Thompson were not parents. They had children they did not want. They hated their own situation. They hated each other. And I think the reason why Shelley told Mr. Williams and told Tabitha Graves everything is because of the weight and the guilt on her shoulders. Not because she was sorry though, but because she just needed to let her out for her own selfish reasons to make herself feel better. But she is dead, so there's no need to ridicule her. As for Thompson, I can only imagine how they treated him in jail. All I can say is, lock that jail cell, throw away the key. Thank you for watching.